I really wanted to write a best-selling novel because I loved reading. But at the same time, my trade is education and development and human resources and all those soft skills. And I'm like, wouldn't it be grand to write a best-selling novel that actually could take the fiction characters and make them case studies for how we approach our world? And so I sat down one day and I started kind of.
Alrighty, it is time to stop hitting snooze and awaken to a life worth being, the fun and inspiring podcast that dives deep into what makes life truly fulfilling. I'm your host, Sue Willoughby, a self-proclaimed badass transformational life coach for women over 40. Join me as I explore the extraordinary journeys of ordinary people who've transformed their lives from the inside out. Tune in weekly to uncover the secrets to smashing through your perceived limits and creating a life that's not just well lived, but totally worth being. Hello, beautiful listeners. Welcome back to A Life Worth Being. I am Sue Willoughby. I am your host. And today I have a special guest, and she is an American writer, an entrepreneur, and an academic researcher. So today we're going to talk about her book that is published and available on Amazon. And the name of the book is Crossroads. And I will let her dig into a little bit about it, but the topic, it is a fiction book that weaves in the concepts of emotional intelligence and life balance. So that'll be a really fun conversation to have. So please welcome my guest today, Rhonda Parker Taylor.
Thank you, Sue. I'm so glad that you invited me to be a guest, and I can't wait to really get into how we can better suit ourselves. My goal with Crossroads was I wanted to approach self-help in a little different manner. I loved reading. I don't know how many people out there in your audience are readers, but sometimes the best way to approach the world is through reading. Because you start getting outside of yourself, or you explore other worlds, or you learn openness. And I thought I really wanted to write a best-selling novel because I loved reading. But at the same time, my trade is education and development and human resources and all those soft skills. And I'm like, wouldn't it be grand to write a best-selling novel that actually could take the fiction characters and make them case studies for how we approach our world? And so I sat down one day and I started kind of writing, and I'd never done any kind of novel before, but it was in my heart to tell the story. And I come from grand storytellers. Everybody in my family loves to tell a great story. So I thought, well, let's try it. And I didn't want to get too overwhelmed. So I kind of had a philosophy of 1 page a day and you're done in a year.
Okay.
365 days, 365 pages. And then you have room to cut if you want to. Yeah. And I found out we did. There was cutting it as after I got done with the first draft. But what I visualized in this was to address some topics. The first one was I wanted it to be a place that most people have never really visited. You don't think of Indianapolis as the place you're going to go visit, especially, the top 10 or whatever. You're going to go to Paris, maybe New York, even
Hawaii,
the West Coast,
Indianapolis. Yeah.
Indianapolis. Although Taylor Swift is going to be here in the next week, so we made it. We finally made it. So here we go. But I wanted to take that idea of people just like us. So, and I wanted it to be a crime novel because I like crime. I'm a Law and Order, fanatic, and NCIS and all of these. So I wanted it to be a crime novel. And I had been working on a community project that overseed the court systems.
Oh,
and
interesting.
I had this mentality, we got to prove and show that the court system isn't just, that there is no winners and losers. So that's where I kind of went into it with.
Okay.
And then the characters took over because I did a DSM-5 assessment of each of my characters to make sure that their behaviors. And for those of the people that are not out there studying mental health, DSM-5 is how a therapist would actually, and even doctors would say,
Mhm.
they have symptoms of depression or anxiety or
Hmm.
whatever it might be, ADHD, which would be me. I have 10 projects at all times going. So, I started doing this assessment, and then I was changing the behaviors to make sure they all aligned with their character based on the
Hmm.
DSM-5 and SOAP note that I had created for them. And then they took over. These characters had a life of their own. They were all imbalanced in different ways. My first primary character and the main character, Paris Pennington, was a finance guru at the AUL building downtown, and she got called to jury duty, and all she could think about is she had to get back to work. She had to get back to work. She had to get back to work. And in doing that, I realized that there was this secondary story, which was life balance and emotional
Mm.
intelligence. What causes crimes?
Mm.
Emotions. So I
Yeah.
used the emotions of anger, fury, and envy. And all
Mm.
the characters show it at some point in the book, so that it's kind of like a game of Clue, like an Agatha Christie kind of a feel versus a um, if you are in the genre of suspense, that somebody like a King would be more of a fantasy kind of book.
Yeah.
Mine was more crime, and Agatha Christie put the clues out there. And so
Fun.
I started looking for some proverbial thoughts, and it was anger is cruel, fury is overwhelming, but who can stand before jealousy?
Mm.
Envy makes the bones rot. So
Interesting.
So think about it. All of those are things that could actually cause a crime. They
Yeah.
also destroy us as individuals. If you're not balanced,
Hmm.
you simply just aren't paying attention to your life in all areas. Maybe you're a workaholic like Paris Pennington, or maybe you're like Dave in the book, where you have a longing for a balanced life, but you haven't found the life partner. And we all have something. Or it could have been like Billy Knuckles. He was too
Did you say
engrossed.
Billy Knuckles?
Yes, that
I
was
love
the
that.
name of
That's kind of like a film noir name.
yeah, he was too involved in being in his friend's life, that he didn't pay attention to his own life and got caught up.
Oh.
So when I was doing it, the characters just took over, and I realized, what, we really need to talk about. There's more than life than one or two dimensions, and when
Hmm.
any time you put too much focus on somebody else, something else, and you're not creating a journey for yourself that's one, based on your physical health, your mental health, your spiritual health, your integrity, your home, your family, your connections, then what ends up happening? You lose yourself, you lose your
Hmm.
journey.
Hmm.
And so Crossroads is kind of like a self discovery while you're reading it. And as Meryl Hemingway said when she endorsed the book, she said, even chocolate has an expiration date. And it's
Interesting.
true. Think about it.
I did see on your book site that it had been endorsed by Mariel Hemingway. That's awesome.
And she's a big proponent of life balance, and that's why.
Mm.
I wondered when the publisher said we need to get this to Meryl Hemingway, why would she even care?
Yeah.
She's been on her trajectory forever. And then I did more research on who she was and what her life was like, and she paralleled a lot to Paris Pennington, being a person of excellence, but at one point in her life she was very out of balance. And what
Mm.
ended up
Interesting.
happening is she ended up having to realign herself, and then making mental health a bigger part of her life.
Interesting. That's fascinating. I love that you chose to use fictional characters are any of those fictional characters, uh, do they come from any part of you, or do they all come from you?
I would say they all came in, we've all experienced stuff, and that's where we sometimes we don't embrace each other because we think we're so different, but there are so many commonalities in life that we do. And they also embraces the Midwest culture.
Mm.
Work comes first. You try to excel. You try to do all of these things. But what you have to really do is realize that if you're not focusing on self care, you never fulfill your dreams. My dad was an entrepreneur, and he would say all the time, it's not about your passion,
Mm.
it's about the people that you employ.
Oh, interesting.
And
Tell me a little bit more about that. I'm curious. Yeah.
so what you end up doing is when you put everybody else first, you forget, that wait a minute, it's
Mhm.
okay to say no and take care of yourself sometimes. Or it's okay that you spend a few minutes every day to write that page to follow your passion. It's okay to show dogs if you like dogs, whatever. It's okay to bake a cake,
Yeah.
whatever it is that brings you happiness. It's a exploration in finding your happiness. Life is. And telling that to a first generation immigrant that came, the parents came to the United States from Poland during the wars, that didn't, that I think would have been one of the reasons a lot of the characters have the characteristics that they have. So I would say all of them have something of me in it, and everybody that, we know. Because when you think about life, if that self-awareness is in it, in it, it's whether we use it or not. And
Hmm.
I think those characters allowed me to explore the internal, external world as I viewed it at different parts of my life.
Interesting. Can you give me and I agree 100% with you. The thing is, people talk about, oh, I keep meeting the wrong people. I can't have good relationships. But here's the thing: you can't be good in a relationship with another person unless you're good with yourself, and unless you're at peace with yourself, or have some sort of knowledge about some sort of emotional intelligence around
Mhm.
what makes you tick. And I believe that wholeheartedly. And then, getting out of, we're talking a little bit about your next book that you're planning, but but until you do have some sort of emotional intelligence, and I went through this myself. I just plowed through life and didn't care about other. Not that I didn't care about other people, but I didn't care enough about myself to you know represent myself in a way that was healthy and good for me and for those around me. So yeah, I completely understand that.
And I think the importance of what you're saying there about emotional intelligence is really, if you're not self aware from the
Hmm.
internal and external world, and then able to self regulate those emotions that come along with it, what ends up happening is you're not managing and being involved in any of the actual emotions of self or others.
Hmm.
And when that happens, what ends up ruling is the negative emotions that causes the tension in the room versus what can solve the problem in the room. And then you have to look at then the motivation and the drivers of everybody because of those emotions, because you haven't regulated anything. And then you're right, you can't have any kind of healthy relationship
Hmm.
in your social world or social skills without putting prioritization in the meaning of those relationships and what they really are to you. And being able to do that is a huge opportunity. But if you don't do it, it's a huge loss because you lose those relationships. And then there's conflicts that, end up evolving, whether it be a sister, a brother, a loved one, a work relationship, because you're not nurturing that social connection, which is a big part of life balance also. Are you nurturing the lives of the people around you?
Yeah. Yeah. So, as an academic researcher, is this an area that you specialize in? Tell me a little bit about that. What's the connection?
The connection for the emotional intelligence piece for me is I am not the brightest bulb in the bunch. and what and what I found when I was reading and researching about emotional intelligence was that it doesn't matter if you're not the brightest bulb in the
Right.
bunch. It's your ability to do those 5 steps of self awareness, self regulation, and empathy and social skills that are important. And when you can do those things and you can bring the group together, the one that's the brightest one in the bunch can help you build your team, build who you are, build your organization, and also help you understand. So, and it allows you to have and cultivate an inclusive relationship with those around you, and where you're not a cookie cutter of everybody that's around you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I love that. So, tell me, how did, let's say, you're the main character, what was their arc as they were going through developing their emotional intelligence and life balance? Can you give me sort of an example of how that?
And in book two of the fiction novel, she'll get more into developing it, because
Okay.
the arc itself for her is she's lost. She
Mm,
excels in everything she touches, but she is basically an island on her own. She hasn't developed that emotional intelligence, and she hasn't developed that life balance. And because of that, people can plot and do different activities to her that are to her detriment.
hmm,
And that's kind of the storyline, is, who is doing these things. She becomes the jury foreman, and all of a sudden people around her start becoming ill and dying,
hmm,
and the IPD has to figure out why. And she has no, like, awareness of why this is happening to her. And the fear and the legal system and being a part of it and not understanding it provides a new nuanced idea that, wait a minute, not only are these people scary, and they know they have the opportunity of knowing where I live because I'm in the jury pool,
uh-huh.
but
Scary.
and the murder is a 15-year-old girl that's stabbed 72 times. So
Hmm,
there's a violent history in this bunch, but also she has to look at the people around her. People are sick. People are dying. This has been the pattern of
hmm,
her life. And one of the reasons she has no life balance is she's relied on only herself all of her life and been the caregiver of her employees. And going back to the Midwest value is, it's about the jobs you produce and you sustain for people so that they can take care of their families. So having that mentality and not going back and saying, wait a minute, if I just did this, I can have a happier, more fulfilling life. Or if I did this in this relationship, I would have more time to pursue personal goals and aspirations. And she doesn't have that balance or the ability to do it. So she has to foster the culture that she needs as she moves into the next phase of her life.
oh, okay. Okay. That's interesting. Um, you you speak a lot about like breaking through those perceived limits and living a life that's truly worth being. Can you share an experience where you faced personal or professional challenges and how emotional intelligence helped you get beyond those limits?
I would say it's the story of Young and the Restless.
Ah,
That
I
is
think
the
I used
story
to
of
watch
my
that
life.
show when I was a kid.
It's the one thing I can have on when I'm doing research, because Victor Newman's voice has not changed. It's the same voice it was 20 years ago. So I can hear him speaking, and I don't have to turn and look at a television, but very little television can be on when I'm doing research, because you have to look at it or something. There's a noise, you have to see what it is. And so there, everybody in life has those challenges. And now,
Mhm.
being a woman, it could have been interviewing for a job and they say I'm not qualified, but I have as much qualifications as somebody else, growing up. Or it could have been, um, when I was in school, we had to pass proficiency tests to graduate, and I was not the brightest bulb, so I struggled with that and had to have a mentor and a counselor to help me get through. Um, in business, there's always the no's. Even with an endorsement like Merrill Hemingway,
Mhm.
publishing and marketing a book is a challenge for any new author, and so that's one that you
Yeah.
always have to keep pushing and coming up with new ideas and fresh ideas and of what you want to do next, and really your passion is to go back and get the other one out. So, but what I do love and what I like about making it through those challenges is, even when there's a setback, if you can make a measurable goal that you can break down in chunks and find a way through it, what ends up happening is you feel like, you should be doing the happy dance, because you've accomplished something that has not necessarily come easy to you, but you've done it. And it could be even a life hit. Sometimes it's not limitations you have on yourself. I'm
Mhm.
sure you had that before, but life hits. Someone becomes sick. Someone, you have to take care of a parent. Because they're aging. It could be that your visualization of a goal changed. I was really thought at this point in my life that the academic piece of my life would be the focus. But what happened in my life that changed my focus and my realization that my goals that I had embraced had to change was my adopted son at that same age that I was working with was shot and killed at work.
Oh, wow.
So I had to
I'm sorry to hear that.
reevaluate my model to what I thought success meant to me. And we
Mm.
all go through something. Maybe it's a divorce. Maybe it's a loved one that's passed. Maybe it's addiction in the family. Maybe it's, a setback from you started a company and it's just not getting the traction you thought it was going to get. Once you rest and recharge, you're able to come up and rise above all of that and really have a natural appreciation for the successes when they come through.
Wow. I just, when I hear you talk about that and I think about, how you started out your goal, you're like, I'm going to write one page a day. It doesn't sound like much. You're like, I'm going to write a page a day. That's a lot. When you think about it, I mean, sitting down to a blank page and getting your thoughts out there one page at a time. And I'm sure that, like you said, once you started, right? One of the things you mentioned was breaking things down into small things, which you did. You wrote one page a day, and that was great. And then you said eventually the characters just sort of took over. And I'm sure that, it became easier and easier to do a page a day. And probably you ended up doing more than a page a day.
Right. Once you got started,
Yeah.
it's that. And so, like, if the same thing I tell new college students is the same thing I would tell a new author, that's wanting to sit down and write. first, for you to be successful, you have to have your own space,
Mm-hmm.
wherever it might be. It could be on your bed with your laptop or tablet, or it could be in an office, it could be at the kitchen table, a corner, whatever it is. But
Yeah.
you have to have a space that you know that at this time I do my homework. If you want to be successful, at this time I'm going to write that page a day. At this time, something is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, then you can communicate to the ones around you, hey, this is something I'm going to do, and how do you feel about that, and get the support. And then once you get the support, it is easier to spend that time for that one page a day. But
Yeah.
until you get the support and until you get that spacing, it's almost like, where am I going to do it? How do I do it? What am I going to do? You don't have any organization that allows you to be successful.
Yeah, that's true. And the other thing that came up for me when you were talking about that, and you're like, tell people what you're doing when you were getting ready to write your book and do all of this. Did you feel to tell people what you were doing? Did you feel selfish at all? Like you were
No,
doing this, like I'm telling you that I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to, because I think, sometimes people struggle with, and especially like you were talking about being from the Midwest, where it's self last, right? Take care of
right.
everybody else and the work and all that kind of stuff. I was just wondering if you encountered any of that in your own, limiting beliefs.
Definitely. That is one of the hardest things for me,
Mm,
because I, by nature, want to help others and be the caregiver and make the food, and my love language is feeding you, and doing all these things,
mm,
serving, saying, hey, this is my spot, my time, was, to this day, is still always a challenge. There was a recent occasion where I was talking to my sister, and she's like, well, you're really into podcasts, and you could do your own, and you could bring this person in. I was like, hold on, stop, wait, time out. And I expressed, I said, I can help in any way I can.
yeah.
I said, but bringing someone else on and taking on another project, then it becomes not the mission, the vision, and design that I'm at right now. And maybe once I grow things for myself, I can take on a podcast on my
Yeah.
own.
Yeah.
But right now, that's not in my vision, and so I had to say no. And then she called me back, and because she's my accountability partner all the time. She's older, so she gets that role. And she said, I'm proud of you, because any other time you would have taken it on, and then all your dreams would have been pushed to the side.
Yeah. That's a great point. I think, we all, and I used to be a lot more of a people pleaser, right? Where you just
Mm-hmm.
like, yes, 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 yes. I don't want to let this person down, so I'm going to do this thing. And then, I don't know about you, but a number of times when I've said that I'm going to do something, I still do it. I go through it. But there's like this little thing on my shoulder, a little bit of resentment or a little bit of like, "Oh, I wish I didn't have to do this," kind of thing, right?
And
But
it
you
ends
just
up being a knot right here, right?
right,
And you need to go to a
exactly.
chiropractor to get it, or a massage therapist, because you've taken
Mhm,
on something that's too much. What I've learned, not only through the book, but also through being seasoned, and if I could tell my younger self this, I'd say it's okay to help others. And it's
mhm,
okay even to take on projects. But are you putting your physical wellness first? Are you
mhm,
putting your intellectual growth? Are you making sure your emotional well-being is part of your model of success every day? Are you creating your spiritual connection with yourself, and your, how you feel about spirituality? And I'm not talking about just religion, I'm talking about with the
mhm.
world.
Yeah,
Are you practicing your self-care? And if you are doing those things, then you can take another project on.
right.
But if you're not at least spending that 15 minutes a day, and getting some vitamin D from the outside. You're not looking into the emotional mindfulness that you need, or some of these other things. You're not ready for another project.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like being on a flight, and there's a reason that they tell you to put on your oxygen mask first and then help others, because if you're not getting the oxygen, you're not going to be able to help anybody else.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's not that you don't care. See, a lot of times what ends up happening is that when you say the no or you set the healthy boundaries, you feel
Mhm.
like, oh, they think I don't care.
Yeah. The
Or
guilt.
I'm like you said, I'm being too selfish. But
Mhm.
really what it's doing is also allowing them to grow,
Mhm.
because you can even outline steps for them without taking the project on. You can
Mhm.
give them the resources so that they can walk. You can give them the seeds to till the ground so that they can have that same success. But promoting the bodily health and self-care of self is as important as their success. And so many times what ends up happening is we promote others and at the
Mhm.
detriment of our own physical, mental, and spiritual well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. When you started writing this book, did you, I mean, it sounded like you had the intention that it was going to have a self-help, quote unquote, undertone. Was that your intention, or did it just evolve?
I think it was my intention that that's the way she was going to be, and it
Okay.
evolved. But I also had this model in mind that I wanted to be able to, after everybody read the book and they said, "Oh, I enjoyed that," but I really related to the characters, and you know what, that person was like one of my friends that I knew, or this is how I felt when I started my career, and now I'm in a different spot. Then I could give to them a model to evaluate and set their goals based on the 13 dimensions of life. And so I've created a workbook.
Oh,
And I
nice.
and I did this workbook. I started this concept in my 20s. I was taking a road trip from Indiana to the West Coast, and I wanted to be a better version of myself. And so I went into the stores and bought all the self-help books I could find, but there wasn't one like overview that you could actually set SMART goals for all the dimensions. Instead, there was one on maybe grief, or one on, life, career balance, balancing home and career, or maybe relationships, but there wasn't one that you could say, wait a minute, let's embrace continuous learning in all the aspects. And what I did, and I have a sample of one of the on my desk. So this would be like where you would prioritize. You can't really see the different, but you can see the concept. So these are
Okay.
all your life balance categories. So I first have people rate how satisfied are they in all those categories.
Nice.
And then they say, okay, well, in intellectual growth, I'm only doing it maybe 50% of the time that I should be. I'm not really paying any attention to it right now. And then they can put it in a priority ranking.
Ah,
Okay, what's the
interesting.
most important? Is it your physical health right now? Maybe you've been diagnosed with diabetes, or maybe you've have a heart problem and you need to put that as the priority, or maybe you're having relationship issues, and you need to make them. But meanwhile, you're setting 1 year, 3 year, 5 year goals for all those categories. So then it becomes more of a, hey, wait a minute, I can do this without making it, it's just it's the 2% improvement in every area.
Hmm.
And then you get satisfaction in all the areas.
That's great. Is the workbook out as well as with the book, or
The
is it
workbook
coming?
is coming out right after Christmas.
Oh, great, great. That's awesome.
Mhm.
That's awesome. So, as we're kind of wrapping up here, I'd love to know, what is your personal, do you have any daily routines, or do you have some things that you do? Like I have a morning ritual that I do. What
Mhm.
is your routine or ritual or whatever that you use on a daily basis to make sure that your emotional intelligence is well filled and that you have a good life balance? What's your secret?
The first thing that I firmly believe, and it's kind of a military kind of thought process, but I spend some time in my bedroom and
Mm-hmm.
I make sure that I make the bed and I make sure that I open the blinds and look outside so that I can get a perspective that the beginning and the ending of my world is okay. It's stable. It's what I want. It's where I want to be. And then, of course, coffee comes in. Coffee's I am a very slow head when it comes to coffee, but during that coffee time is my meditation time too. I
Mm-hmm.
Part of the intentionality that I put into my life was the world sometimes is a scary and hard place to navigate. So I
Mm-hmm.
had to make my home world my peaceful place. So I bought a property that has 3 acres that I could go outside and it's in my own park. I can see, I call them critters. I was called on a podcast, say, what do you mean critters? Are you talking about snakes and mice? And I was like, well, kind of, but it's more like the
Hurry.
chipmunks, the foxes, the coyotes, the deer, and seeing all the animals as they are either going to nestle in their bed or getting up because it's time because the birds are chirping and ready to be fed, and really getting that spiritual connection with the world. My dad used to always say, you can tell the economy by the types of trucks and vehicles on the road.
Interesting.
And if you think about it, next time you're on the road, look around. And he's so right. If there's military, coming down the road, it's the weekend, it's, the National Guard, probably. Hopefully it's nothing else. That's what our normal, you
Right.
know, philosophy would be. If there's a lot of semis around, that means they're shipping things. Are they all Walmarts? Are they, construction, um, um, transports? What is it that's being moved? And that's very true. And then I used to tell him and I would say it's the feminine version of what he was saying, but you can tell a person's character and what's important to them, their worldview, by how they approach the world and treat the animals.
I love that. That is so perfect. That
And
is
so
so
I
perfect.
try to put those reminders around, even in my home. I have little, figurines of animals, and the silk flowers, and then the bay window opens up to the park-like view for me. So it allows me to get that spiritual connection. And let's say you're in an apartment, that's okay.
Hmm.
You can still get that same view on your porch or your balcony. Create
Hmm.
what brings you wholeness, and then embrace it as your visual of what you want your attitude, your world, your conversations, your relationships to be. And then find the path towards it and exercise that physical movement towards that peace.
That is such great advice. And I love your connection with nature and how that's your spirituality. And it is. I mean, if you're getting out and just sometimes I just have to go for a walk just around the block or go out in my yard or whatever. Sometimes I go visit my horse and just make that connection with nature and with
Mhm.
with critters. I love to connect with the critters. Critters are my jam. I love the critters. But that's beautiful. And I do have a very similar kind of morning ritual with the get up, get the dogs up, make some coffee, come back to bed. All of us. They don't sleep with me, but they come back and we have a little snuggle time in the morning. And I meditate and I do my journaling and I just have that quiet time to start the day from a place of peace. and a place of, being grounded and feeling grounded. And it really does make a difference. I mean, if I'm traveling or whatever and I don't get to do that, it's okay. I do then just have to find another way to sort of, make all that happen. And it makes a difference, I think.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I agree.
That's beautiful. All right, Rhonda, what's the best way for people to, I'm going to put a link to your website and Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff, and also to your fabulous book in the show notes. What is the best way for people to get in touch with you or reach out or whatever?
I try to make myself accessible because, one, I think it's important not only to those that relate to my book, they may have questions on where I came up to with the conclusion, but it's rhondaparkertaylor.com for my website, and everything, all my social media pretty much is a version of Rhonda Parker Taylor. And
Perfect.
I will answer back if I get a shout out. So feel free to do it. Also, thanks Sue for such a wonderful podcast. Make sure you tune into her show, like, share, and realize that, all of us have a connection. And when we do, she's from, the West Coast, I'm from the Midwest, and guess what? What a great conversation, and be part of it and enjoy it with us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for wrapping up my show, Rhonda. That was awesome. And I love that what you said, be part of the conversation. Be part
Yes.
of the conversation. Don't be the wildflower, right? Because there's so many people out there, and that's what I love about podcasting is I get to connect with you and people in Australia. And I mean, it's just there's so many incredible stories out there. And I want to thank you so much for being part of our conversation today. So
Oh, I
thank you so
enjoyed it.
much.
I've been looking forward to it all week.
Oh, yay. Yay. Well, so much success with your continued success with your book and whatever your next venture is going to be. And we'll look for the workbook, your accompanying workbook that goes along with your book. And may everyone that's listening share this with a friend, help each other have those conversations, find some life balance, and let's just raise the vibration and the emotional intelligence, shall we?
We
All
should
right.
do it. We should do it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to today's episode of A Life Worth Being. I hope you found it fun and inspiring. And to avoid a bad case of FOMO, please be sure to click that subscribe button. If you love what you heard today, please share it with a friend and then hop on over to your favorite podcast platform and return the love with a wonderful review and 5-star rating. It would truly mean the world to me. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and on my website. Links below in the show notes. I appreciate you, and I will see you next week for more fresh insights on awakening a life worth being.